Start my video. There we are.
Hello,
Hi.
how are you doing?
Well, thank you. How are you?
I'm very good, thanks. Very good. Well, thank you very much for joining me. It's very much appreciated. We're just getting everything sort of set up, ready to start. So just bear with us for a moment or two. Have you had a nice week?
Well, it was not a bad week.
Oh, good. Yes, I don't know what the weather's like in Canada, but it's very changeable over here at the moment. We've got rain.
Well, if you can hear a dull roar, I'm right by the banks of the Ottawa River,
Oh,
and
that's
it's in full spate.
oh, that sounds rather
So,
pleasant. Yes.
it's imposing itself on everything.
Oh, it sounds very nice. So for those that are watching along either live or on YouTube, if you just want to get your episode ready, and we're going to pause on the opening shot of the episode, and that is so the opening shot of the episode is with the Avengers line with Albert Fenner and Brian Clemens credits. So we'll pause on there, and we'll make a start in about a minute's time. If that's okay, Blast.
Good enough.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay. Just make sure no one's having any troubles logging on or anything. Do you do many online events, Blast?
Not that many, not really. Of course, during the pandemic, I did quite a bit of work online.
Oh, yeah.
But because I do a lot of voiceovers, and I keep a microphone in my closet.
Right. Yeah. Is it quite straightforward working from home, doing that sort of thing, or do you prefer to be in the studio?
Well, it's better to be in the studio with the people who, who all have a stake in it. But when necessary, we improvised, and it worked fine. And in fact, I had I don't know if it started, but I had heart surgery in the midst of the pandemic.
Oh,
And they sent me home early. And I spoke to somebody every day on Zoom, on the telephone, sometimes 3 times a day, and I felt very well taken care of. I think the whole pandemic has changed the dynamic of a lot of this sort of communication.
oh, yeah. I think so. And yeah, it's opened up a lot of avenues, hasn't it, for a lot of people. So I'm just going to move my light slightly forward. Okay, so we'll make a start. So I'll do a countdown for 5, and then I'll press play. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and play. So the first thing I wanted to ask, Vlast, was how did the New Avengers come into your life to begin with? Do you remember how did the job come about?
Specifically, I don't remember how the job came about. I do know that I used to watch it quite regularly. I was young, and I guess it was in the 60s.
The original show, yeah.
It was one of my favorite shows. And I was an actor. I had an agent. The agent spoke to somebody. 50 years on, I don't know who said what to whom.
Yeah. And the episode, of course, opens with a nice shot of the CN Tower in Toronto. It's a pity that the New Avengers didn't show off the beauty of Canada more than it but was able to. What did you think of the episode after seeing it again after all these years?
It was fascinating. I didn't know what to expect all these years later. And it's pretty camp.
Yes,
pretty funny. It reminded me of Batman, the original Batman show somehow. The music, the goofiness of the villains, sort of the quick assumptions. but I actually I did enjoy it. And you know, it's fascinating. This particular episode has some traction during these days of what do you call it, AI,
Yes.
which is exactly the subject of this particular episode 50 years earlier.
Oh yes, it's become very timely. I think.
It's amazing, yeah.
And had you seen the new Avengers at all? As just because
This show, no, I hadn't seen it.
no. Um, because obviously well, very closely related to the original series, but as you say, very much sort of a period of its time. The jazz music, it does have that sort of feel of you know, sort of an era show, doesn't it? I suppose. Do you remember much about? We're seeing your first scene now with you and your two Russian colleagues. Any memories sort of were jogged when you saw your first scene?
Oh, absolutely. First of all, the people I saw, I haven't seen. I mean, all my old dead friends. You know, this is many years later, and there's Dave who played one of the spies, and there's Cease, and there's the guy in the parachute. That he was a stunt man, I remember, and but I have to tell you that opening shot is one of the highlights of my career, because I was on top of the CN Tower, and they wanted to put a harness on me for safety, obviously, which would be demanded now. And I said, no, I was young. I wasn't gonna, you know, I was okay, I was fine. So they didn't have to shoot around the harness, you know. Just a few years later, shooting in another high location, I couldn't get near the edge. I think you lose trust in your reflexes, or something happens as you get a little bit older. But I was right up there and loving it, and watching the small airplanes coming into the island airport, which was between the tower and was near the tower, and watching them land beneath me.
Yes.
On their glide path. So that was quite a spectacular moment in my life, being way up there.
Oh yeah, and I think now you can do tours, and it's got sort of like a skywalk thing. So you were kind of doing it before they did it for the public, sort of thing.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. Jan Rubesh played the master spy there. He's the one with the authentic thick accent. He was Czech. He was I'm of Czech parentage, and he was connected somehow to my family. So it was an old home week somehow, you know. And what else? Oh, and by the way, you know, this is one of my first jobs.
Right.
And I have become over the years, I've become, I had done a lot of voiceovers and narrations and so on, and a bit of a specialist in accents. But in that episode, they replaced my voice with an accented voice. There was discussion, would a Russian spy have an accent? And I think what we had decided was that a Russian spy, no, if he was to be effective, would not have an accent. But then I guess they decided that he would have an accent, because it was known that he worked at the Russian embassy.
Yes.
So, you know, so one of my first gigs, it wasn't even my voice.
I did sort of, I was wondering whether it was your voice or not. There was a very famous voiceover artist, Robert Rearty. I don't know what your first scene in The Office, so your second scene overall. It does sound very much like that gentleman, but I'm not entirely sure who he voiced you on
Yeah,
the
I have no idea.
The Canadian episodes of the New Avengers are not as well documented as some of the earlier ones. They seem to be a bit and unfairly sort of sidelined a little bit.
Right.
Which is one of the reasons why I want to do this event, really, just sort of reappraise them. So were you aware but it may be either at the time or now, why the New Avengers ended up going to Canada?
Well, I don't know. Business is business. I don't. That's why I have an agent. The
Yes.
agent knows
Yeah.
the business. I keep my innocence. I
Right.
don't know who's doing what, why,
Mhm.
except for the characters.
Yeah. So essentially, it came down to money, basically. So the producers had a partner sort of financing the first couple of series of the New Avengers, and towards the end of the second season, the partner disappeared, and they ended up with this hole in the funds. France bought 3 episodes. They went over there to film, and Canada bought the remaining 4 of the series. So they ended up sort of transplanting it over. And there was indeed some discussion of doing another series predominantly based in Canada, but the money didn't quite sort of come together on that one, unfortunately. So that's an abbreviated history of the Avengers in Canada. I mean, it was the so it sounds like the Avengers was a big show in Canada, that it had sort of, it had a
It
following.
was for me.
Was for
I
you?
liked it. I don't know what the numbers were. Those kinds of facts weren't as common as they would be now in the internet age.
Yeah.
Who's number one? I don't know.
Mm.
You know.
And was it a nice experience to do the show?
Oh, absolutely. I was so pleased. Patrick McNee is who he presents himself as.
Mm.
He was a lovely guy, wonderful to work with. Gareth Hunt and Joanna Lumley was terrific. I must say that there's that scene where I get a machine gun lying on Lakeshore Boulevard in Toronto, and I'd spend a good part of the day as she stood next to me with her gorgeous legs.
Mhm.
So that was an excellent benefit. But yeah, I very much enjoyed working on it. Yes.
And was it nice to get that scene you referred to, of course, in an exterior? Do you like working on occasion? It's always pleasant to get out of the studio.
Oh, I do. Yes, I do mostly location here. Well, it depends on what it is, of course, but
Yeah.
yeah, I've done a lot of location work
Mhm.
and like it. I like being able to travel, and I'm a little spoiled by it actually, because whenever we do go someplace, there's always somebody to meet the plane, get me to my hotel, make sure that I'm okay. Oh,
Mm.
here's some money for food.
Yeah.
you know uh, and these are the best places to go, they tell you, so
Mm.
you get the best of the local lore when you're traveling, when you're on location,
Mhm.
and I enjoy it immensely, and I'm
Mm.
quite spoiled by it actually.
Oh, lovely. I take it people like the producers you would never have met. They probably wouldn't have perhaps visited the set at all.
I don't know. The producers are in and out. I'm usually focused on what's going on set.
Mm. Yeah.
And the producers are usually back here somewhere,
Thing.
and around overtime, you can spot them because they start doing the producer's pace.
Yeah. I mean, was the show a fairly mundane in terms of how it worked? Did it feel like a well-oiled machine, the episode?
Well, everybody's professional. Everything worked correctly. There were no big screw ups or snarls. I'm sorry, it was a long time ago.
Oh, no, that's right. I mean, I think if it was a disaster, you'd probably remember. But if it was just
Yes, I would. Yeah,
yes, that's
absolutely.
have answered
Yeah,
the
yeah.
question. For those who might be interested, Hugh Harlow was one of the Canadian producers. He's still alive as far as I can as far as I can tell. Um, did a few things as production manager of Interest, Aliens, a couple of Bond films.
Oh.
Was a second year director on Funeral in Berlin. So quite good credits that Hugh had to his name. And the other one is Ross McLean. That this is the only episode that he did, but Hugh did 3 of the Canadian episodes, and there's not too many credits for Ross out there. So some of the Canadian figures involved in these episodes that we seem to know sort of precious little, unfortunately. And the same with a lot of the actors. I'm guessing a lot of the actors were more sort of theatre based rather than film or TV, because there's some of them don't have a huge number of credits. So so I was kind of wondering what the acting community was like in Toronto at the time. Was it sort of a very sort of hive of activity for the acting community?
It was pretty busy. I wasn't living in Toronto. I've always been based out of Montreal. And so I'd go off to Toronto and do a gig now and then.
Yeah.
But it's a very busy. It was not as busy as it is now. There's an awful lot of production going on now.
Yeah.
Back then, well, a lot of Canadian productions, and the American invasion hadn't really begun. Where the Americans would come up for our to make a film for our cheaper dollar and friendlier environments.
So very much the dollar to the you got the Americans got more bang for their buck, as it were. So that sort of put a lot of resources into the Canadian industry, it sounds like.
Yeah, we're at about 75 cents to the American dollar now, so that works in their advantage, of course.
Oh yeah. I think it's the same with Australia. A lot of big films shoot in Australia at the moment, and again, it's because they get a good conversion rate. I think.
Well, whenever our dollar starts going up, I get a little nervous about what's going to happen to the business, because I count on it to lure in the foreign production.
Oh, absolutely. But Britain in the 70s was very bad, and even the Bond films had to relocate to other countries because they just couldn't afford to make them over here. So you don't want the industry slump, do you? Like that. I was just wondering how, because you worked in obviously a lot of countries, how is the Canadian industry versus, say, the American experience or working in England?
I've never worked in England, actually.
Oh, never worked in England, right?
Never. I've worked with the English often.
Yes.
And in fact, love working with the English. There's I find a lot of the English performers have theater experience, and there's a much more collaborative feeling working with with an English star versus an American star. They're more one of the guys, and I've always enjoyed that quite a bit. But the American business it's much more. I mean, we operate the same way here, but just not as big.
Yeah. And would you say that the Canadian way of performance is similar, perhaps more to the British versus the American, in terms of the hierarchies, the approachability that you kind of alluded to?
I like to think so, but I think we're very heavily affected by the American style.
Well, geographically, of course, yeah.
Yeah.
So we just saw the scene where you we think you reach your end, but despite your sign of the end is near, prepared to meet thy doom, you do survive. Did you meet Gareth Hunt at all, who played Gambit? Because he is in the Exterior.
I met him. We didn't have a lot to do with each other.
No.
But we had some cordial chats, and I know enough that I spoke with him enough that I remember him as a very pleasant guy.
Oh, good.
But we didn't really have anything much going together.
Yeah, everyone I've spoken to always really has nothing bad to say about him. You know, he seems to be one of those
Right.
really lovely people, and unfortunately died far too
Oh,
young.
did he?
I think he was in his late 60s, I think, when
Oh,
he died. Um, Actually, of the Avengers cast, the main cast, old and new, there's only Linda Forson and Joanna Lumley left,
right.
sadly.
Well, she did
Um,
all right, didn't she?
oh well, yes, she did, yes. And you sounds like she was very pleasant and cordial on set,
Oh,
Joanna.
yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, yeah.
And one of the you probably didn't meet him, but there's a guy called Ray Austin who was the coordinating producer
Right.
for
I know.
the series, and essentially Albert Fennell and Brian Clemens, who was producing the episodes, were not in Canada. I think they were trying to work out the financial mess back in England. So they
Right.
sent Ray Austin, who'd done a lot of directing and for them, to coordinate the Canadian episodes. And one of the things he said to me, that it was quite frustrating because they couldn't quite get the permissions or the help really from the
Yeah, of course.
Toronto. Whether that was because you were saying that the film business was not as big as it is now, so whether they would a production like the New Avengers wasn't easy to make because it was perhaps not as developed as some other sort of studio systems. And would you say that may be unfair, would be to say?
That would make sense. Yeah,
That makes sense.
we did. I did a lot of my training at about that time at the National Film Board. They had John Strasberg, Lee Strasberg's son. I studied with him for a couple of years, and that was at the film board. And they were doing excellent work, but this was sort of the government run. It started during the war, you know, as to do propaganda for the government. But it became artistically quite significant and well received. But you know, not a big commercial business, you know.
Yeah. Because obviously we had the CN Tower at the beginning, but there's very few recognizable landmarks used in the Canadian
Right.
episodes. And I think maybe this one's sort of set up to close things off and all sorts of things, perhaps of that nature.
Right.
I must mention one actor we're looking at now who plays the police chief, Harvey
Oh,
Atkins.
Harvey Atkins. Yeah, a young Harvey Atkins. He's also left us, I think.
Yes, unfortunately.
Yeah, he became quite well, he was known to me, and he had a very particular voice, which you'd hear quite often on television as well. He had a very particular voice.
And it providing a bit of a comic relief, and it's well, not a comic relief at him, but he's a very sort of funny and likable personality, and I think really adds something to the episode. We're about to watch your unfortunate demise. So we thought you were dead, but actually just a bit sort of bit too soon. You do share a scene with Sec Linda. Do you remember him at all?
Oh, Cease, yes.
Oh, Cease Linda.
Well,
Yes.
it's Cecil,
Yes.
but we called him Cease.
Yes.
Cease Linda. Yeah. Again, he was quite he was a hardworking actor in the day.
Yeah.
And so I was quite happy to work with him. I'd probably been with him in other things that, you know, we'd go in for a day or two here and there, and you know, he was very familiar to me. Not just from what I've seen him in, but just from working, you know.
And a lot of people will know him from Goldfinger playing Felix Leiter, and
Oh, okay.
I think also Quatermass and The Pit, a very sort of well-known BBC production as well.
Right.
Again, not Canadian, but spent most of his life living in Toronto.
Right.
So having looked at it again now, and you with your death scene, what's it like to see that?
Kind of goofy. It happened. I don't remember even shooting it. It was just, boop. It's done.
Mm.
I, I don't know. I found it a little little easy. I would have liked to go through that window a bit harder.
Yes,
I've done.
it does come as a bit of a surprise, doesn't it? Which I suppose perhaps
Yeah.
it was the point that it's you're disposed of in a very efficient way, which of course is kind of what
Right.
the story is sort of leading towards. When it comes to a character like this, do you have much time to bring ideas to table in terms of anything from your dress to little moments?
I was a 20-year-old kid.
Yeah.
I'll just take the direction as it comes to me.
Yeah.
I didn't know it. I didn't really know enough to offer too much.
Hmm.
I was well, in my young 20s. I don't know what year that was produced.
It was 77.
77. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So I would have been 27 then. Yeah.
Yeah. And so do you remember the director, Richard Gilbert, at all?
I'm sorry.
No.
No.
I mean, again, a good thing, because if he was bad, you would have remembered. So
Exactly. Yeah. I've worked with
um,
lots of British directors, lots of and uh, almost always had a great time.
yeah.
Loved working with the Brits. I worked with Richard Attenborough, for instance,
Oh yes, I did want to touch on
and
that a bit later,
absolutely
but
loved the guy.
yes.
And it was such a treat working for him, for instance.
Hmm.
His style of directing was so subtle and so quiet and so actually sweet. Because I remember I was doing some scenes and I got a little over the top, and he called a cut, and he came up to me and he was tiny. And he sort of pulled me down, pulled himself up on my lapel, and said, "You are a rascal, aren't you?" And that's all the direction I needed. Oh, gotcha.
Yes, that sounds fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I just want remembered any more from of the fellow cast. Dave Nichols or David Nichols
Yes.
played Keith Greenwood, one of the agents. Do you remember Dave Nichols at all?
Yes, he was a friend of mine. He was from Montreal. He was a regular. He worked for the CBC as a newsreader and presenter and as an actor. So
Hmm.
we've raised a few glasses in the day.
Oh, good, wonderful.
Uh,
And his fellow agent, just checking my notes, Michael Ball as Dave Cope.
yeah, I didn't know Michael really.
No, because Michael's still with us, but unfortunately, unfortunately, so many of the cast aren't around anymore, are they?
Right.
Dave Nichols unfortunately died he's only 69 when he died. So
Right.
I've got a feeling that with any production where you have whether it's French, Canadian, it stipulates you have to have a certain number of actors of that nationality. So I think that's probably why. And also, of course, you didn't have to import actors into into the country to sort of do it. So have you worked on many productions like that where it's sort of been very much heavily a foreign production company, but they needed to have so many Canadians, etc.? Is that fairly common?
Oh, absolutely. The reason for that, I was the president of Montreal ACTRA, which is our performers union, for a couple of years.
Hmm.
So I'm familiar with that. I shouldn't have been. I wasn't totally unqualified, but anyway, these arrangements, these agreements, you get tax benefits if you come in and hire a certain percentage of local talent. That was our way of incentivizing the growth of the industry. And so if you wanted to get your to write off a big part of your budget, that was the deal.
Yeah.
I think it's fairly intelligent, and right now Canadian productions are there's an awful lot of it. So
Oh yes, it makes good sense, doesn't it? We just saw the Linda's death. Paul Baker's character was just incinerated in the episode, in the scene we just saw.
yes.
At times, the new Avengers can be quite sort of horrific, like that, but also then they followed up with the computer display saying eliminated and incinerated. So it's kind of sort of bringing that humor, the humor
Right.
versus the sort of more macabre side of it. What do you think of the actual script, the writing for this episode?
I don't know. It was a little bit. How do I put it? Wasn't not very lyrical.
No.
It's very linear, very obvious. There's some good gags, some good little some good repartee, but I didn't really notice the writing much, which maybe that's a good thing.
Oh yeah, yes. I'd say an argument for that. Yes, you should be watching and invested in the characters rather than thinking about one particular element. Dennis Spooner wrote the episode, and he was one of the main figures in the new Avengers and the original Avengers. He did Doctor Who, all kinds of British TV
really
series. Very much considered sort of the best of the best when it comes to sort of writers, and also sadly left us too soon. I do wonder whether the Canadian episodes suffer a little bit by the scripts having been written in the UK and then brought to Canada without the writer there, and maybe some things that perhaps could have been adjusted to Pacific actors like yourself. The locations maybe didn't quite get done, possibly.
I didn't have that feeling. The locations were fairly generic. So you throw in you throw in the CN Tower, you could shoot it anywhere. It's make it Toronto.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's again, some of the new Avengers episodes are not, don't have some of the best locations that we've already kind of mentioned. So I don't think you see Canada as in its best light, unfortunately.
Well, this is why Montreal is such a popular location. We have Old Montreal, which has an area which is a few hundred years old, and stands in for Paris or London, or there are sections that look like New York, and the nice thing is that people don't really bother the stars too much. Leonardo DiCaprio got lost in quite a poor part of town and asked for directions. He got recognized. Nobody bothered him, but I'm sure his handlers must have freaked out. But apparently the actors love to come here because there's no press, there's nobody chasing you around.
I mean, did you ever were tempted to move to LA and relocate? You like the lifestyle in
Yeah, I have friends who've done very well. They've gone to Los Angeles, but these are people who have careers with phones growing out of their ears, and they're very busy in the business. I'm lazy. I have an agent who takes care of the business end and allows me to be innocent and unknowing of how all this happens.
Yes. I'm curious, what made you want to get into acting in the first place?
I started in school. The theater club in school, and loved it, and started at university. I started taking acting classes, and I just was always involved in it in some way. And really can't see me doing anything else. I don't have enough personal sense of responsibility to do anything else.
Well, it's quite a nice life, isn't it? I think also you're doing so many different parts, whereas most people are stuck in a job. It's a variation, I think, that appeals to a lot of actors.
Yeah, I ran into a friend of mine here yesterday. We had a nice chat. He's a drummer. He's a Caribbean. He plays a lot of reggae and Caribbean music and so on, and but also jazz and so on. And we got into talking about how working as artists is not for the faint of heart. There is no security.
No.
You don't know what's going to happen tomorrow most of the time. And but like I like to say, I had every now and then I have a really good week one day.
Yes. Yeah.
That day covers my week, or sometimes a week will cover a month. And it's what saved me is the voice work. I just came back. This morning I drove for a few hours to a studio way over on the other side of Montreal. I do video games, and I was hosting a very popular game. I'm attached to that game now, and so that pays nicely, that kind of stuff. And I remember talking to a producer from LA some years ago, and she was quite surprised because I did do a lot of film work, or I was doing at that point. A lot of film work and television and voiceovers and narrations and cartoon voices and you do what you can. You have to be a jack of all trades, particularly in this market.
Yeah,
and that's just to have the work to put food on the table.
Yeah.
It's very rare that you become a big star so you can survive only on your acting in the movies or being in the theater.
I mean, a lot of interviewers do ask actors, why did you take this role, that role? But of course, the answer is it was to earn a living, to put food on the table. So
I rarely say no.
Yeah. Well,
Very rarely.
I suppose you don't know where the next job necessarily will come from, so you don't wish to say no because you think, well, what if the phone stops ringing, etc.
Well, unless I take exception to something, I'm not that well refined that I will only do certain things. And also, my name is Vlasta Vrana. It is not a common name for an English-speaking actor to have, and somehow it's gotten into production's heads that I can do every accent. I have done them all. I have done Germans and Spaniards. I've played Italians and Greeks, and of course every variety of Russian and Slav. I often do what I like to call the Yugobanian, which is that sort of that pan-Slavic accent that you often see on which is very non-specific, and you couldn't say that person was from a particular country, just vaguely Slavic.
Yes. Yes.
So sure, I get a lot of that kind of stuff. I went to Paris once to give an Inuit voice to Toshiro Mifune. You know him, the Japanese actor. He was one of Kurosawa's favorite actors.
Yes.
And he was playing an Inuit, and that was a very bizarre thing because the Japanese tend to have a very staccato sort of a language, very very sharp and pointy, I like to say. While the Inuit is very round and very they tend to talk very in a very sort of a sing-song kind of a way, So to put that voice into that face, that was a very interesting job. But I do that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So there's not an accent that you really struggle with. You can handle them on. They come to you eventually. You can get.
Yeah, I don't do the English accents though.
Oh.
Those all those regional accents. Friends of mine are very good at that. They'll shift over a few miles and do a regional accent in in England. But I don't have the ear for it. I don't know why.
Yeah, I suppose it's, yeah, we can't all be good at everything, can we? I suppose, but we didn't touch on earlier the AI warning message, the technology that
Yes.
this episode does have. There was a very good scene with Patrick McNee and a lady who, Suzette Colcouture, who plays the woman showing Steed around the modern architecture of
Right.
Canada and all the different things, and she says, they say one day soon we'll be able to turn on a light just by thinking, and she's very enamored by this idea, and Steve just and she says, I wonder where it will all end, and
Yeah.
Steve says, before it's too late, I hope. So there's definitely a little message of caution. Do you think this was something that concerned people a bit back in the 70s and 80s, emergence of perhaps, or
Well, maybe that was also the same era that 2001: The Space Odyssey came out. Remember that?
yeah,
Open the bay doors,
yeah.
Hal. What are you doing, Dave?
Yes, yes,
That's exactly what was
yeah,
going on there.
yeah. I mean, you
Oh,
could
obviously there was a concern, but it was so far into the future. I forget the guy's name, who's sort of the godfather of AI, who quit Google last week. I can't think of his name. Uh, he was saying that in his world, while they were developing all of this, that was still way in the future. And then he realized all of a sudden, oh no, hell no, this is going on now. We're here. We're there. This is why we need to pause, because we're at a point now where we might just lose control of it.
Oh yeah. Jeffrey Hinton was the
That's it.
yeah,
Yes.
and the other part of Steed also mentions about this automated service station that his friend went to fix his car horn, activated by a car horn to get in and out, and they've never seen him since, and the car horn still doesn't work. So there is a
Right.
there is the sinister sort of side of it.
Yeah.
I had the same thing where I just replaced my iPhone. They wanted me to have my old iPhone that doesn't work anymore to update the new one, and it was kind of like this circle that I couldn't get out of. So
Right.
yeah, I don't think technology is great all the time, but there is certainly, as you mentioned, this 2001 sort of, I don't necessarily know if it was a conscious sort of borrow for this episode, but the X41 computer is a bit like HAL in
Right.
2001. So that's
HAL 9000, as I recall. I think that's what it was.
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, it didn't occur to me until you mentioned it, but it is quite obvious, really. It is quite a small cast for this episode. There's only 12 actors credited.
Right.
A few people moving in and out, but it is quite an intimate episode. And the last sort of 10 minutes, roughly, is Joanna Lumley trapped in the building. So it was Steed and Gambit outside, but it is very much a sort of becomes sort of her episode towards the end. I mean, do you like to watch your work, or are you one of those actors that likes, or do you perhaps not like to see it?
Makes me crazy.
Yeah.
I get squirrely. Actually, it was far enough removed that I actually enjoyed myself watching it last night.
Oh, good.
But anything newer, anything that I would have a faint possibility of doing again, the worst thing that a director can tell me is, how did you feel about that?
Right.
Because, and my answer on that is, do we have all night?
Yeah. And I mean, have you done much theatre?
Not so much lately. My memory's gotten a little wonky. I've managed to frighten myself a few times. Last few times I've been out, nothing happened. It was just, I'm 73, and I just don't have the same vigor in my memory.
Hmm.
So I used to do quite a bit of theater, and I loved it. And there's nothing to me. There's nothing like a live audience. And I discovered late in life, there's nothing like a live comedy audience.
Yes.
There's something
Hmm.
I absolutely jones to do comedy. I love it, and because of big guy, big voice. I don't never got the funny parts,
Hmm.
you know, and I really wish I'd had a few more of those, because I enjoy that immensely.
Yeah. Enjoyable, but also it say comedy is one of the hardest things to do. Do you find that to be true?
Absolutely. I think my greatest respect among performers is for the stand-up comic,
Hmm.
because if I'm on stage and everything just goes to shit, there's nothing's working, everything, the audience is hostile, I still have my piece to get through.
Hmm.
But a stand-up comic who gets into trouble, where's he going to go?
Yeah, there's nowhere to run, is there? No.
And I have friends who are comics. They're probably the toughest people I know,
Hmm.
in terms of mental toughness, but also just emotional toughness. What amazes me is that as tough as they are, they can be hilarious.
Hmm.
It's easily, at the drop of a hat, they come up with something. And yes, they work on their material, and the act is usually a well-honed machine, but their instincts are quite something to behold.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And just to hold an audience for whatever set it is, or 90 minutes, or a lot of big comedians fill arenas these days, and you think,
Yeah.
well, to do that on your own. I don't know if you've ever done a one man show or two-hander or something like that, where you kind of had to sort of hold, by
Yeah,
your.
I've done small theater pieces,
Hmm.
single-handedly, and a few two-handers. Uh, it it's great because you can get into the zone. If everything's working well, this is this kind of thing that actors, jones for. This is what we want to be in, that zone, where uh um you're channeling the character more than performing it.
Hmm. Yeah. And do you find that theatre is perhaps in a way less constrictive because you can change performance a little bit night to night, whereas TV or film, it's locked in, you can't ever do anything about it?
Well, not really. Well, theater is not the same thing every night.
No.
Every performance is different, and that's the
Hmm.
discussion among actors. Hey, what about tonight's house and
Yeah.
performance, and what about this guy, this character? Where
Hmm.
was he going?
Hmm.
That's the kind of discussion that you have after a show. Things do evolve, and in fact, I've in the time that I've been an actor, the rehearsal period for theater, for instance, has shrunk enormously.
Hmm.
It's perhaps a third of what it was when I was beginning, where you can work it and work it and work it. Now I find in the last few years, this is perhaps why I got scared off. It's so quick, the rehearsal, that I'm really not ready to open until 3 days after the opening. When you've had a chance with an audience, and got to see how it works with in the real world.
Hmm.
Um, we used to be able to work that out much more, years ago.
Hmm.
And now, because of economics, I suppose it's just, bam, 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 go, go, go.
Yeah, things seem to get tighter and tighter, and I think the same
Yeah.
with, well, I mean, obviously television has changed hugely. Obviously in your career, but in England, we in the 60s and 70s, it was videotape rather than film, so TV done as live. What was TV like? Did the Canadian model, was it close to our sort of structure?
I think so. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, that was fairly universal, that set up. What was I going to say? Yeah, because of the economics, I did a little TV series a friend of mine produced and directed a few years ago, and I played. It was it was a crime story, and I was the crime boss.
Hmm.
And there was a very limited budget. It was a real homegrown little project, and so all of my scenes I did. It was 12 episodes. We shot in 12 days.
Hmm.
But it was what we call block shooting. I don't know if you're familiar with those terms.
Yes.
In block shooting, you do all of the scenes in one location at one time.
Hmm.
So you could do, it could be episode 1, it could be episode 3, 5, 10, and 12. And that's your day.
Hmm.
And so while you're doing this, very often you're in every scene, and usually dialogue heavy. And you have no time. At the end of a 16-hour day, by the time you get back to your hotel, you've been given the rewrites for the next morning. On the drive, you go through it and you see, okay, this is new, this is new. You remember, you get to bed, you're exhausted, you get up in the morning, you still haven't learned the lines, really. But as you're going to work, you're being driven to work, okay, what's up first? Boom, 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 you're working on that. You're in the makeup chair, you're getting ready. And then as you're preparing for each next scene, you're preparing these scenes. So that can get extremely stressful, extremely tiring. It's interesting what it does for the energy, though.
Oh, yes.
As long as you're physically and mentally capable of doing it, you'll be on fire for that time. But there's every opportunity to fail, because it's very demanding.
Oh, yeah. It sounds like it. I suppose theatre is perhaps a more organic way of doing a performance, because you do it from beginning to end in order, and you get the emotional journeys as your character does. Whereas if you're suddenly doing scene 60 of something, you've suddenly got to be very, very sad in this scene, very happy in the other, which you shoot.
Right.
Is that can be quite difficult sometimes to get into that frame of mind you need to be?
Yeah, but I've been at this for a long time. I've done the work. I'm not that I have to work every time, but I have developed tricks and developed ways of moving myself around a little bit emotionally and so on. I remember I had to play a guy who lost his daughter. And I knew about it for several months beforehand, and then I do most of, because I live in the country, I do a lot of my thinking in the car, and then I sort of process it, and then we shot that scene after knowing about it for a while, and me having thought about it quite a bit, and then 2 weeks later I had another scene in another project, same thing. I was ready.
Yeah.
And that's now in my holster.
Oh, right. Yeah.
I've got to freshen it up each time, but I know how to get there.
Yeah.
And well, that's experience, I guess.
Oh, yeah, very much so. I'm just going to talk about the end of the episode before we just get to some additional questions. I'd say the last few minutes is all about Purdy trying to work out how to escape and to destroy the computer. She very conveniently gets part of her skirt caught on this, so her skirt suddenly loses 3 inches.
Oh my!
Yeah, wonder why they did that. And then, of course, she destroys the computer by setting off the sprinkler.
Right.
system. So she's at the end trailing around in the rain, and
Oh,
it
yeah.
should have got at least another series just from that scene, really.
Yeah,
But,
that moment, the ripping of the skirt, and then the wet t-shirt contest was it felt a little contrived, but yeah, okay, it was the time. Yeah,
I think they were definitely trying to get another season at that point. Yes,
yeah,
yes.
because she is gorgeous. She's absolutely gorgeous.
I mean, yeah, and I think she was so right for that role, and so was Gareth Hunt and Patrick McNee.
Yeah.
Of course, they work so well together, and it's one of those shows where it's quite frustrating as a fan because you know it could have ran and ran and ran,
Right.
and unfortunately, like a lot of things, it comes to a dead end. From your career, have you been in things where you thought, oh, this is going to be really great, a long running or lots of sequels, and it doesn't quite sort of happen? I suppose all actors have something like that.
Well, I have had many beginnings.
Yeah. Yes.
um, sure. There were. There's always, hope burns eternal. I've been in a number of projects that I thought would continue more, but I've it's a funny business. I was supposed to, when I was younger, probably in about that point, I was supposed to go do a film in Japan
Hmm.
with Anthony Quinn. It was a great part.
Hmm.
And the day before we had to leave, the financing dried up.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it goes. I wasn't upset.
Hmm.
But that kind of thing is very common. You got a show that you think is working very well, and you'll be comfortable for a while. The funding dries up, or somebody doesn't want to be part of it, or whatever.
Yeah, you just got to kind of go with the flow a bit and know that things may not necessarily go in this direction, but you just kind of sort of follow its course, I guess, really.
I don't count on anything.
No.
No.
Yeah, I had an actor said a while ago there was a rumor that they were going to make this movie of a TV show that he was in, and they said, "Oh, do you think he'll get made?" And he said, "Well, I'll believe it when I bought the DVD of the film. Once it's been made, and
Right.
then I can say yes." But it just showed how much faith you had necessarily in one particular project coming to be.
Yeah, and I've also got lots of DVDs of shows that never played.
So you did sort of pilots and
Straight to DVD.
Oh, straight to DVD, yeah.
Yeah. You have great hopes for theatrical release, and nothing.
Yeah. So things that perhaps just don't turn out the way the studio thought, and then they just dump it kind of on the home video market sort of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Just get something out of it.
Oh yeah. Because you did a Highlander film, didn't you? Highlander 3, the Final Dimension.
Highlander. Yes, sorry.
Yeah. Yes. I don't know how well that one did, but I don't think it's as good as the first.
As I recall, what was his name was in that? He played Tarzan.
It's Christopher Lambert, I think.
Christopher Lambert. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. Yes, I remember that. Yes. But it wasn't a big deal. I was there for a few days, and
did you?
I never saw it.
You never saw the final film?
No.
Did you?
Christopher Lambert turns out to be a lovely man. He drove me kind of crazy during the Tarzan, and I hadn't realized what a nice guy he was. I felt bad about how I spoke about it, but anyway.
I mean, I've seen him at conventions. I go to some film conventions in the UK, and he comes over sometimes, and he's very good with his fans and what I didn't meet him personally, but I can see he's I mean, does that side of the acting world appeal to you, to to sign autographs and meet the fans, or is it perhaps not quite?
I feel funny about it.
Yeah.
I get recognized every now and then. My favorite though was because I'm based in Montreal, where the majority language is French,
Yes.
and so we live in sort of a there's a certain anonymity being an English actor in Montreal. And there's these two women walking down the street. They stop me and they say, "Wait, I know you. You're somebody, aren't you?" I said, "Oh, I hope so." Are you a journalist?" That's every now and then I have to sign autographs and so on, but I find it strange.
Yeah. Yeah, I suppose it is really, because, and it must be quite strange, people coming up to you and they know who you are, but
Yes.
you don't know them. That kind of sort of, they have an advantage over you. That must be quite disconcerting.
Well, when it was particularly acute. I was in a restaurant a few years ago, and there's a table of people, and they're all grinning at me, and I'd say, "Oh, they must recognize me from something." And then I realized that they were getting their noses were out of joint because I didn't recognize them. They were in my high school.
Oh,
And the thing is, they had seen me get into the hoary old man that I am, but I never saw them change. I had no idea who they were.
that's interesting.
They
Yeah.
weren't the kids that I used to know,
Yeah.
But and this is true. People have seen me evolve, and it's bizarre. There are people. The CBC came out to my house about 20 years ago and did a little feature story that they put on their news channel, and they spoke about my career and so on. And I was in a grocery store, and there was this man who kept sort of looking at me, and I'm, okay, what's going on? And he finally approaches me and starts talking to me about what I'd been talking about in that interview 20 years previous. I have no idea how people's memories work, how they remember this sort of stuff, or why. I get emails and letters from people. There's a whole thing about collecting autographs and collecting headshots and so on. I understand that. I'm sure that many of them have no idea who I am, or probably have never seen anything I've done. But I do get a fair bit of that kind of action, but not in the streets so much. But my favorite was, we have a restaurant in Montreal called Schwartz's. And I don't know if you know Montreal smoked meat. It's a kind of pastrami that's particular to Montreal, and people swear it's the best in the world. And this place is the temple. And I was in there having a sandwich, and one of those sandwiches, and it's one of these places with all the photographs, the autographs on the wall, and all the stars who visited. And as I'm going out, the cashier's grinning at me. And as my turn steps up, as I step up for my turn at the cash, she said, "You're Vlasta Vrana, aren't you?" And I'll tell you, I had a rush of pride to be recognized at Schwartz's. That was great. That, for me, that was a big time. I have arrived. This is as much as I'd like. I worked once with I've worked with a number of people who've had to have bodyguards with them because people are always coming at them. Not so much in Montreal, but that's what they were used to. And I couldn't live like that. Not that anybody's ever offered that to me or suggested it, but I can't imagine living like that.
Yeah, and under a microscope all the time, and you go into your face on magazines and newspapers, and you kind of lose your life. I think so.
Well, I've worked with a number of people who've had those kinds of concerns. I did a film once with Michael Caine in Russia. It was the Harry Towers series.
Oh, Harry Palmer.
Harry Palmer. That's it. and I played the accent. I played a German assassin, and Michael, we shot all of our scenes together in 3 days, only on his from his angle, on him.
Yeah.
We got all his shots, and then he buggered off because the story was that he'd said something, and the Russian mafia were mad at him, and he felt that there was a security problem. So they wanted to get him out of the country as quickly as possible. I don't know if he just wanted to get out of there because it was a fairly grim period in Russian history already then. And living there was even shooting there was got to be a little unpleasant. But his story was he'd said the wrong things to the press, and the wrong people were after him. Yeah, that's and then I finished the film with all of my shots with a body double, and
doing the
on angles on me.
Yeah.
You know,
I mean, do you find most actors, even big names, usually do the reverse shots, will stay there to do the lines with you, or will certain people just don't want to do that and they'll get a stand-in to do it?
I'll tell you, that's my judgment on actors. There are actors who will make a point, not only of being in your eye line at the proper spot, but even as you are performing and they're completely out of the shot, will with their faces give you something, will feed into your scene. And those are the actors that I like to work with. Those are the actors who give a damn about the gig, about the job, about the whatever it is that we're supposed to be creating. And this, of course, there are others who, as soon as they don't have to be on camera, just let somebody else stand in, and I don't like them.
Yeah. I think it's not the easiest professions at times, and you want people to have your back and to be in a nice atmosphere. And of course, it's not if people are just abandoning people. And yeah.
Well, I make a point. This is a very important thing for me. I make a point to be there, whatever side of the camera I am, and to be fully engaged.
Oh yeah. Before we leave the world of the new Avengers, as you said, you have two Russian colleagues in the film. Do you remember Rudy Lip?
No. No, I don't really know him.
Oh, that's okay. I thought I'd just mention it in case you might have done. You did know the other gentleman, though, I believe.
Jan Rubesh.
Yes.
Yeah, he was actually Czech. Yeah.
Was
he played the Slavic Ukrainian parts all the time, but his accent was quite natural.
Yeah. Again, he has a lot of credits to his name. Episodes of the X-Files, Witness, the Harrison Ford film. A lot of perhaps very obviously a lot of the actors in the show have appeared in the series Due South, and of course you have as well. And
right.
I suppose it's was one of those things that kind of every Canadian actor probably appeared in one episode or the other. Was Due South an interesting show?
Due South, I like the story. Yeah, it's story of a Mountie and his was it his dog?
And his a wolf.
Yeah.
Wolf,
Yeah, it was quirky. It was a little fantasy, perhaps, but they don't run around in their dress reds. It's like having a soldier in his Beefeater uniform all the time. It's tantamount to that. But sure, it was well done, well written, lovely humor.
Yes, nice romanticized version of Canada, I suppose. Like the Avengers was the original series in London, it was a romanticized version of the English Gentleman and
right.
or Bond or whatever it might be.
Right.
There was a funny line at the beginning of the episode where Steve says we're going to Canada, and Joanna Lumley says she hasn't been to Canada, but she's seen Rosemary. So
Right.
you know the Mounties, the Canadian Rockies, etc. So
Right.
you know, obviously that's a nice little, you know, it's sort of what we're alluding to with due south. And there is one scene that is set in England. It's supposed to be set in Kent when the guy parachutes in at the beginning.
Yeah, that was Dwayne McClain. He's a stuntman. I met him many years before that. Yeah.
I am hoping to do an event with Dwayne actually in a few weeks' time, talking about the new Avengers. So that
Really?
should be quite. He seemed quite interested. So hopefully we can make that work.
Oh boy, that's great. Yeah.
And of course you can tell it's not in England because you have a big sign behind them saying "Welcome to Kent," and you know if they ever sort
Oh,
of do
right, of
that,
course.
you can tell you're nowhere near the place.
Right.
So I was just wondering, would something like the New Avengers have been quite important to you at the time to be in a popular TV show? Was it a sign that I'm getting kind of where I want to? Was it a good sort of starting point?
I suppose. Yeah. I was already doing a fair bit of work. It was one of my first jobs.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was thrilled to be doing it. I mean, because it was something that I'd been following for so many years already.
Yeah.
So yeah, of course, yeah, it was great to be on that. I don't know that I figured, okay, I'm on my way now, but sure, yes,
A nice thing to have on your CV, as you say. It's a nice little
yeah, of
thing
course, yeah,
to have, and particularly as a fan, ticking something off of your kind of
that's right.
wish list as
That's right.
well. Do you find that you get when you appear in a popular show, maybe not this, but maybe something like You South, that you get a lot of feedback from people when you make sort of these appearances?
Not so much, not
Not
really.
so much, no.
I live, but frankly, I live pretty much outside of the out of the spotlight. I live in the country. I don't socialize in the business very much.
Hmm.
I go to work.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah,
have friends. I really whom I in at work that I absolutely adore and love and so on, but I very rarely see them.
hmm.
You know, and I don't know if I'm healthier for it, but that's I just don't get much feedback.
Yeah. And I suppose the danger is if you listen to too many voices, it can perhaps dilute what you bring to it. Perhaps because everybody has an opinion on things, and what do you listen to and what don't you? I guess.
Yeah, well, um, I was in a film not long ago, Glass Castle,
Hmm.
working with Brie Larson,
Yes, I was
and
going to mention that. Yes.
I did a nice. It was a nice scene, and the director, while we were doing the setup, sat down next to me and started telling me how much he liked what I was doing, and I stopped him and said, I worked with friends of mine who are directors, and when they start on this, I tell them to piss off.
Hmm.
And he's no he wouldn't talk to me after that. I felt really bad. I wasn't clear. What I meant was that it gets into my head.
Hmm.
If people say this is great, what you're doing, I really like what you're doing, then that's what's in my head. That's what I'm thinking about instead of what I'm supposed to be doing.
Hmm.
I'm thinking about what is it that they like and how do I do more of it, or how do I do it better? It becomes about them, and I'm and what I'm putting out instead of the discipline of the performance.
Yes, yes, I understand. Yeah, yeah,
It
yeah.
it throws me off of my game, if you will.
Oh yeah, yeah. I feel it's the same sometimes. Somebody gives me a comment about something, I tend to make a mistake shortly afterwards because it sort of
Right.
it knocks you off kilter a little bit, doesn't it?
Yes.
So just to finish off, of course you have so many credits to your name. It's difficult to pick out a few to briefly touch upon, but I just wanted to mention Upside Down with Jim Sturgis
Yes,
and Kirsten Dunst. Was that interesting?
that was fascinating. What was his name? Is Argentinian director? Oh, geez, what was his name? Actually, the technology on that was fascinating.
Hmm.
We were shooting. There were two adjacent studios. With miles and miles. I don't know if it was early days for this kind of technology, but there was so much technology, bundles of cables like this back and forth to move everything in such a way that you could create the upside down world,
Hmm.
the world here and the world here, and perform, so you could interact with somebody upside down on the upside down world in front of you.
Hmm.
So that was cool. I love that kind of technology, And there was a dog, a Neapolitan Mastiff we had to do a scene with, who was an absolute sweetheart. What a lovely girl, except that she did everything correctly, except that she's a Mastiff and she'd have to be cleaned up every 10 seconds, just drooling. But absolutely loved that dog.
Hmm.
But the technology, that's what I love about the video games. It's I get into these video games. I do a mocap, motion capture.
Oh, yes, yes.
And the first video game I got involved in the early 90s, it was just read this. Doesn't matter, just read it. But now we do table readings for a film, and we analyze the characters, the motivations, and it's just like a feature film. And the technology is phenomenal. I'm like a kid in a toy store.
Hmm.
You'd be playing a character and you're wearing the motion capture suit with the little helmet with the microphone and the little light and the little camera, and so it captures your expression, and then it lays over the animated expression over the face and body, and in real time as you're doing this you can see the character you're playing on the screen.
Hmm.
It's not fully animated yet, but I one thing I love about this business is that kind of stuff, that kind of real clever, ingenious way of putting things out there, like in Upside Down with the upside down stuff, or a lot of it is very cutting edge. When we're doing some effects, it's fascinating to me. I love that stuff.
Yeah, certainly very, very exciting visually what we can now achieve, certainly. The director of that, I've just looked it up, it was Juan Solanas.
Yes, that's right.
Pronounced that
Yes.
correctly. And you say Juan was quite a good director too.
Yeah.
Yeah. But do you, you mentioned technology, so much of cinema is dominated by big action films and superheroes particularly. Do you think
Right.
as an actor, and do you think it's sometimes takes away from other films and performance? It becomes a bit too much about the visuals.
Well, I don't know. It all depends again, it's an interesting phenomenon. I remember doing a film with Bruce Davison. We did what was it called? It was a TV show. Anyway, we the story was we were in a lighthouse. This lighthouse was the superstructure was built in a studio, and it was a green screen set. So here we are, acting our brains out, howling winds in a room. Sorry, howling winds and seas crashing around us, and this very calm green screen that to play to. But you always have to remember what's going on in the room, who's going to hear in the space, who's going to hear you, how do you react to it. You've got the wind machines and so on. So it's all very artificial, and you really have to go inside yourself to be there.
Yes.
You have to visualize very strongly what it is that you're putting out that will be laid on later.
And a couple of other things. French Exit with Michelle Pfeiffer. Did you remember that one at all?
Yeah.
Did you get to work much with Michelle Pfeiffer? Or...
I had a couple of scenes with her. It was mostly with what's his name, the young guy. I'm sorry, my retention of names is the guy, her son. He won an Oscar for Manchester by the Sea. Anyway, I was mostly with him, and he was a bizarre young man. He's a very wry sense of humor. And the whole piece, it was written by a writer that I very much like, who has some very bizarre. Was it
Patrick DeWitt?
Patrick DeWitt? That's it. And he wrote The Brothers Sisters, which is a very funny, very clever novel. And he wrote this, and very much enjoyed his twisted sense of storytelling.
Was the young actor you were thinking of Lucas Hedges?
That's it, Lucas Hedges. Yes,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Yeah.
No, the power of having Google.
Yeah.
And of course, then you've got big films like Red 2, where you play a general
Right.
in that one. Again, it must be fun to be in these sort of big
Oh,
films.
that's a hoot. That kind of stuff is a treat. Bruce, I got strangled by Bruce. What's his name?
Willis?
No, not Bruce Willis.
No.
Bruce. The guy with the intense blue eyes. McDonough. Anyway. It's fun to walk into a film like that. I just had a few scenes, but it was such a well-oiled machine. You know, if you're up for it, it's a treat to do. You know.
Yeah, I think maybe some actors perhaps sort of turn their nose at it. Maybe they take themselves too seriously, or think perhaps, or you know,
Helen Mirren was in this. She's done some good work. You know,
yeah,
she's got a future.
Oh yeah. I mean, it's amazing how the cast seems to they seem to attract very, very big names, don't they? For these, well, I suppose it's partly the paycheck, isn't it? They give them, but
it's a good payday. I'm getting royalties from that, from my little involvement.
Oh right, yeah. It wasn't David Thewlis.
No, but
No.
that's one of my favorite actors.
He's very good, isn't he?
He is amazing. Have you seen him in Fargo?
Yes, I have. Yes, I think I have. Yes.
That was the best villain I've ever seen. He played that beautifully.
That was was that the original film, or was that this TV series?
The TV series.
I don't have quite seen all of it, but I must.
Yeah, well, David Thewlis in that it became one of my favorite actors.
Yeah, he's very, very good, isn't he? And speaking of another actor who I hold in quite high esteem, Dougray Scott in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Again, but would that have been quite interesting? It seems to be quite an interesting take on the story.
I'm sorry.
I was thinking about Dougray Scott in Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It seems to be a very sort of interesting take on the on the story.
Was I in that?
It's on your IMDb page.
Oh, that's right. I was the judge.
Yes, the judge.
Right.
So obviously, he's convicted for murder, and he wants to be executed before he kills any more people. You know, so it's kind of an interesting slant on it.
This is what happens. I get compartmentalized. I get brought into. I love playing judges. I'm at that age now where I play old men in wheelchairs and judges. You know, and weepy old guys who don't make it to the end credits, but and the judges, and I love playing judges because there's always a place to sit, and you've got a place for your book and your drink, and you don't have to wear pants, you know. You're always behind the bench, so you could be nice, and you can be the only one who's still nice and cool. You know? But you know, again, I've done a lot of courtroom stuff, and I have no idea what the rest of what's going on, because the courtroom scenes are isolated from everything else. It's in the court, you know.
Yeah.
I was in Nuremberg. You know, there's some Ned Cox is in that, or Brian Cox, and what's his name? Anyway, a huge one of those star-studded casts. And I went in and did my my interrogation, my questioning of the witnesses, that gave my little speech. And the other 99% of the film went on without me. I have no idea what happened there. I'd have to watch it.
Yeah.
You know.
So you're not overly not always interested sometimes of seeing the completed way you fit into it. You kind of, it's a few days here, then you sort of thinking of the next sort of thing, really.
Yeah, pretty much. And as I said, it really, watching myself, it just doesn't feel healthy.
Yes, I don't think it is really, to be honest. It's like people who stare at themselves too much in the mirror. You know, I think it could be potentially a bit too self-indulgent. I must mention a year in the death of Jack Richards, where you play the lead role.
Right.
Was that a good film?
It was rough. It was a young man who put together some money and filmed this. I was lured in by the presence of Micheline Langto, who's a lovely actress. She's a well-known actress in Quebec, and mostly in French. And I've worked with her quite often, and we've become good friends. And so I did this. I wouldn't have, you know, it really was a tiny little production. But once you're committed to it, you got to go for it. And I played this guy in a psychological, you know, meltdown and crisis, and so it was a good exercise. And I'm always happy to do that. I do quite a few small films when I can, you know, because they're not like the big productions. You know, the efforts, seem more spontaneous, more you know, everybody pitches in, and I like that collaboration, you know?
So it's a bit more intimate, like say theatre is.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So
I did a play once. You know, the norm when you're doing a play, when I was doing theater, you know, you get the script, you memorize as much as you can, you'd show up, and you'd basically be walking around for the first few days, at least I would be, with the script, you know, doing the blocking, and you're walking, you know, you do some you'll do some reads, and you'll talk about the development of the characters and the development of the story and why this and why that, and you start working out all of the moments. And then you walk it around on, usually with like tape down, you know, scenery. You know, it's just you know, tape on the floor. You know, this is this wall, this is that wall, and you create the movements. You know, okay, I'll move from this space here by this wall here to the, you know, to there for the purposes of this. So I got into this one production, and this was the usual way of doing it. I got into this one production. It was directed by anyway, Monique. She taught at the academy in Quebec here, the Theater Academy, and I got the script on the first day. One side is the text, the other side is the direction. And each line of text had a number with a corresponding direction on the opposite side. And inside the front cover, there was a grid of the stage, all numbered, you know, A9, for instance. So you'd get the line, the direction would be moved from A9 to so this way.
Right.
And I was kind of outraged. I said, how do we develop this? I thought that this is, how do we do this? But then I went along with it, and I found myself being completely liberated, because I didn't have to invent how to get from here to there. I didn't have to work out why I'm doing it. I just did it. And then I had to justify why I was doing what I was doing.
Right.
And just somehow that kind of invention was liberating. I was free just to perform and not to manipulate the scene. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I just had to make it happen exactly the way it was given to me. And that was an interesting exercise.
Oh,
I wouldn't mind doing a few of those again.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. I saw a production of Much Ado About Nothing at the Old Vic a few years ago, and it was James Earl Jones and Vanessa Redgrave doing it. So there were obviously the characters in the play are very young, so of course it was a reversal. And Mark Rylance, very famous actor, was directing the play, and he said to them, you come in when you want to and you leave when you want to. So he was sort of being very loose with the entrances and exits, and sometimes the people did kind of tread over other people's entrances and exits, but it was a bit like, I suppose he was going for a naturalistic approach, because in reality you do overlap, don't you, with other people and things.
Yes, of course,
It's a bit clunky, isn't it? Real life versus script. So I think that was kind of that was quite an interesting production. Wasn't entirely successful, but it was interesting, and it stuck with me. So have you done lots of other experimental things like that, or was it quite rare for people to want to
when I
sort of
was
mix it up?
young, of course, when I was young, it was all experimental. We were on the avant-garde. We knew what we were doing. And nobody, and the old guard was on its way out. But sure, I did a lot of that stuff.
Oh yeah, but it keeps it fresh, doesn't it? I suppose. But
well, yeah, but it's sure, you get cocky, and you start developing a belief in yourself, and it's my first day, I remember at university, in my first year at acting class, the first exercise we did, the first thing we did, was a relaxation exercise. And it was quite intense. On the floor, we're doing, physical relaxation, relax your toes, your heels, and so on, and the breathe, and the breathing. And it occurred to me over the years that is the essence of acting. One of the most unnatural, one of the most stressful things to do is to get up in front of an audience, to get up in front of a group of people, most of whom you don't know, and expose some vulnerabilities. And it makes sense to me that the first thing and that you have to carry with you is how to relax, how not to give into the stress of what you were doing. And I know my kids get mad at me sometimes, because in stressful moments I tend to cool down and try to be analytical. And I think I learned that from that lesson, and I still do that as when I'm performing 50 years later. I still do the relaxation. And I spent some time with Buddhists. I had friends, Buddhist friends, and spent some time, meditating and so on. And I realized that a lot of that kind of discipline, that kind of finding inner peace and knowing yourself and so on, very similar to what we learned in the relaxation of becoming an actor.
Oh yeah.
And I think there's a great a connection between, for instance, Buddhist meditation or whatever sort of meditation, and being a performer.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, has there been lots of things that you've had to learn, say, as an actor for a role, that have then had a positive impact on your life, like those real action techniques? Have you had to overcome a fear, or had to learn an instrument, or something that sort of stayed with you?
Yeah, well, being an actor is like always being in school. There's always something new to learn, and very often, what do people pay to see in the theater or on film is human evolution or human experience.
Yes.
And so you have to work through all of that, and I think I'm enriched by that. And also, of course, the details. I once did a film where I was asked if I can ride a Harley Davidson motorcycle. Yeah, of course. I'd never touched one, and I went to a friend of mine who's a motorcycle stuntman, and I said, "Teach me how to drive a Harley," and he showed me on a Honda 90. Which is a sliver compared to one of these big bikes. And I went out west, and I was riding. It was a real club. I was riding one of their bikes, and the biggest guy in the club, it was his bike. He said, "Show me." It's the first time I've ever touched a Harley. So I figured I better make it good. This guy will kill me.
Yeah.
And I just did everything by the numbers, just boom, 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 headed for the horizon. Breathed for a few minutes and came back as hard as I could. Brakes up on the stand, got off. He said, "Okay, good, you got it." You're always learning stuff like that, But like I say, yeah, I can do brain surgery while flying a 747. Why not? I just have to learn.
Yeah. It's a great opportunity to do it, isn't it, as well? And actors always say, if they're asking you to do it, it's always yes, isn't it? So
when my daughter was born, my youngest, she's just turning 30. She came out back asswards, so she was a cesarean. And I, for each of my kids, I was in the delivery room, and so I'm scrubbing up with the surgeon, and I know the surgeon. It's a small town, he's done a couple of things on me. And I'm scrubbing up, and I say, "I did this last week in a film. Shall I assist?" And we had a good laugh about it. But I ended up, I mean, I'm trying to be nice and supportive to my wife, who's behind the little screen there, and breathe, you're all right. But I kept looking, and then finally the surgeon, he's showing me stuff. This is her innards, and I was right in there. And just somehow, because I'd expressed an interest, then the surgeon let me in. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And things like that happen. I get shown stuff. I get into places that people usually don't get to. Secure areas and all the interesting places that are either hidden or locked away from the rest of the world. They somehow allow actors into. I don't know why.
So government buildings and things of that nature. I suppose people are enamored, aren't they, by the silver screen, and it's sort of why exactly? It's complex, isn't it? I suppose, but it's
of course,
and also they feel that they know you as well, as we said before. So maybe that literally opens doors as well. I just wanted to touch finally just on some of the actors that you've worked with. You mentioned the Glass Castle, but Woody Harrelson.
Yeah, I had nothing with him.
You had nothing to do with him. No. Okay, that's okay. Naomi Watts in that one?
No, yeah, she was in that also, but she played Woody's wife.
Oh, okay, yeah, right, yeah. And you did do an episode of Dr. Quinn, Medicine Woman, of course, Jane Seymour.
Yes.
Did you
Yes, of
encounter
course, yeah.
Jane much at all?
Yeah, we worked together for a while. I played her, was it her daughter's father-in-law.
Yeah.
So, it was a sort of a family
Mm.
relation. So yeah, that was a pretty good experience. It was that was curious. Speaking of fanhood, we'd get a group of people, whatever location we were on. There'd be a busload of people, and they were from Germany. They flew over to Canada, knowing that Dr. Quinn was shooting in Montreal. And they finally let them in. We had a funeral scene, and they finally let them into the church to be extras, as long as they promised to behave themselves. But what was curious, this is probably 10, 12 years ago, maybe, or more, maybe 15. And I'd see these people during the day, they'd be kept back behind the barrier and so on. But then I'd read, I'd be talking to somebody, and then I'd get online and I found their site. And there'd be pictures of me talking to somebody, and oftentimes they knew what we were talking about. They're always there.
It's amazing.
I was very curious about that particular production.
Yeah, it's amazing the following for certain things, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was just trying to find the year with Dr. Quinn, but I'm not sure if I can find it.
Yeah, I got in. I started. I got to meet with some of the old time guys. Trevor Howard.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yeah, I did a little film with him, Saint Exupéry, The Night Flight. Lovely guy, hardworking actor. He's one of those Brits that I just loved working with. Sterling Hayden.
Yeah.
Was in the Asphalt Jungle. I played his son. Mickey Rooney I got to play with.
Oh, yeah.
Once. Yeah, just a little scene, but that all pleases me immensely, yeah.
Some real heavyweights that you've just mentioned. Dr. Quinn was 2001. That was.
Oh, really? Yeah, okay. Right.
And a bit, I always thought that Jane Seymour was a bit like Joanna Lumley, very glamorous, never ages. So it's always sort of, one of those.
She's still out there pitching.
Oh yeah.
Lynn Redgrave, I played. I used to say, I say sometimes that Lynn Redgrave played my wife, but in fact, I played her husband.
Yeah. Do you have any particular memories of Trevor Howard that you wanted to mention?
Yeah. Well, he was like the old style English actor. He enjoyed his whiskey.
I have heard that a few times. Yes.
Sorry?
I have heard that a few times. Yes, he did. Yeah.
Yeah, he was one of the old school, and rap would be called at the end of the day, and one of the production assistants would be tasked with guarding his bottle, and literally the assistant director would say, okay, that's a wrap. Boom, the bottle would land in front of him. And I love the guy. He'd show up the next morning a little wobbly, a little foggy, but he'd work it through. And after 15, 20 minutes, he'd be back in harness. But he really worked at it. And he was a lovely guy. I had lunch with him a few times, and anyway, it was one of the actors was being a real pain in the ass, and Trevor would come talk to me. Let's be engaged in a large conversation, because he didn't want to talk to this other guy. So we had a forced conversation, but it was very friendly. I enjoyed him very much.
Oh, good, wonderful.
And I loved the connection to the old the old world of filmmaking, you know.
Oh yeah. Me too. A lot of the events that I do kind of do cover, you know, sort of films of that caliber, you know, and film
Right.
stars of Trevor Howard. Um, we did mention Great Owl earlier, but do you remember
Yes.
working with Pierce Brosnan on that one?
Yes. Yeah. Lovely guy.
Hmm.
Lovely guy. And that was Richard Attenborough.
Yeah, yeah.
And I played the guy. Pierce played this Englishman who lived as a native indigenous man, and presented himself as such. And I played the publisher who got him to write the book that made this is a true story that made him famous.
Yeah.
And so I had quite a bit to do with him, and it was nice. It was a good, well told story.
Yeah, is a
And it was a beautiful production. Jake Eberts produced it, and I'm convinced that that it was his producing that made it such a pleasant set. Everybody on the set worked to a common purpose. You know what I mean? Everybody was devoted to the production.
Yeah,
and it was beautifully done, and the spirit on the set was wonderful. And I'm convinced that it was, the way that people were hired, the combination of people that were hired, and of course, Dickey, directing, and it was a lovely set to be on.
And you say it's a beautiful film and a story that is worth telling as well. And it's
I don't think it quite succeeded. It's had a few shortcomings, but beautifully done.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And so just to finish off, well, I'll give my penultimate word to the new Avengers. Ultimately, you enjoyed seeing the episode again, and I suppose
I did.
You did, yeah. Of course, 46 years ish roughly on since then. I suppose it's quite surprising when somebody like me says, "Oh, do you want to talk about something you did half a century ago?" sort of thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was quite shocked by that smooth-faced young, beautiful boy that was up there. I had no idea. All right.
But I suppose it's quite nice that you get it's nice to be recognized, isn't it, for certain things that you've done, and perhaps some of the more obscure things, perhaps like this has become. I mean, did you, having seen it again, do you understand do you see why people are still talking about the new Avengers?
Oh, absolutely. I haven't really seen more than that episode. The Avengers, the original, with the previous,
the original series of it.
the original series. I was a fan, so I was quite happy to be involved in that.
What was it, mainly the Diana Rigg ones that you sort of
Diana Rigg and what's her name?
Linda Forsen.
Sorry.
Linda Forsen.
Yeah.
There's also Honor Blackman.
Honor Blackman, that's it, of course. Yes. That's yeah. That was quite an iconic series.
It was, wasn't it? Yeah.
That's one time you can be excused for using that word.
Yeah, I'd say iconic, and I think the only reason why New Avengers isn't perhaps always seen under the same umbrella is that because the original series was so iconic, and anything you follow automatically gets a bit lost in its shadow. I think is what
it feels like cashing in.
Well, yeah, and I think also people, Diana Rigg and Patrick McNee was so fantastic, and so was Honor Blackman and Linda, but people have a problem getting that out of their mind when somebody else comes in. So it's not to say anything is lacking, it's just the shadow it sort
Yeah,
of
of course.
casts. So I just want my last question. So of all your career, do you have one or two projects that are your favorites or that you're most happy with for various reasons?
Well, I did like Grey Owl quite a bit. But you know, I'm again, I don't watch myself much. I
No.
love being there.
Mm.
I did a little series. It was a France-Brazil co-production. We were in Brazil for 6 weeks. I was in Brazil, and that was pretty good. I enjoyed that. It was called Rouge Brazil,
Mm. Yeah.
and that was set in the colonial times, 1580s in Brazil, and the costumes were wonderful. And you know, I love playing. You know, so
Mm.
we're playing a different place and a different time and a whole different
Mm.
uh, whole different world.
Yes. Yeah. In terms of directors, you did work, although probably very briefly, on Timeline of Richard Donner. Again, he's one
Yeah.
of the. Do you remember Richard Donner at all?
Oh, he was a goof. Yeah.
Yeah.
He snarled at me, said, "You're the only one with a deeper voice than I have."
There is a similarity, actually. Now you.
But he was a funny guy.
Yeah.
And that was a magnificent set.
Yeah.
My God, what they did. There was a hill not far from where I'm living, actually, just across the river here. There's a section of river for about a half a mile. There's nothing on the river, no houses, no lights, no telephone poles or wires or anything. And that was a location for I played a monk.
Hmm.
And they built my monastery. It
Yeah.
was all made out of cardboard and you know, sticky tape, but it looked wonderful.
Hmm.
And they built up the hill. There was a very steep hill. They built a road, a 2-lane road of crushed rock for, you know, their 40 tractor trailers that they needed, 40 or 50 for their, you know, village up there. And so we did our filming there. It was wonderful. And then they took everything away, the road, everything.
Wow.
They just they just cleaned up after themselves. It was stunning, you know. But Richard Donner was a lot of fun. The war scenes, the battle scenes were unbelievable. Thousands of extras, and you know, 3 tracks tracking at the same time. You know, be a horseman, and there'd be 3 cameras tracking with the horseman through a crowd of 1,000 extras. You know, in full armor.
Hmm.
You know, that was spectacular.
Yeah, I don't think you get many films on that scale and on those kind of locations as well. And you know,
Yeah,
apart from say Bond films or something where they build entire villages and things, you know, it's
yeah. I'm always impressed by that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just to finish off, what does the future hold? What do you still wish to achieve? Types of roles, or are you quite
I'm
content?
available.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I work today. I work this morning. Do some voice. Mostly these days, I'm doing voice work. I'm not on camera that much. I'm you know, well, I suppose if I cut my hair, maybe. But yeah, I've come to this. I whined to my agent the other day. I said, "How come I'm seeing all these scripts for wheezy, you know, teary-eyed old guys in wheelchairs who don't make it past the middle of the show?" You know, it was, and the problem it was, I was at that moment, I just lost it was in the middle of the pandemic, and I'd lost friends, and I was feeling particularly vulnerable, you know, and I realized that I'm at a point now where that's what I play. I play old guys because there's very little sense in not playing old guys, you know. And I'm just feeling a little confined by it, but I'll get over that. But you know, yeah, I've even played Santa Claus on a few occasions.
Hmm.
And I rather enjoyed one. We were filming one of these Hallmark things,
Oh yes, yes.
and I was doing a scene outside on a Sunday, uh, with the stars of the show, and there's a family walking across on the other side of the road, and you could see the children. They're fascinated, and they're looking at me, and finally they sort of sheepishly crossed the street, and Dad asked me very, very sheepishly if he could take a picture, and I said, of course. And I realized that, okay, I'm wearing the costume. I might as well protect the brand,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah.
Um, as surlish and cynical as I am, I figured, protect the brand and go with it. So I go where I go where the wind blows these days,
Mm.
and it's I'm getting old. I'm not as active. I'm not as physically capable as I used to be. So that's all limiting.
I mean, do you find that acting is one of those things where you do get a bit pigeonholed once you hit a certain age or look a certain way? It's difficult to sort of get out of that. Maybe female actresses feel that perhaps more than actors do, but
Yeah,
is it a bit difficult sometimes
I'm
with that?
feeling that now. Yeah,
I don't know.
but then you got just up the river here is where Christopher Plummer grew up.
Oh, right, yes.
And I've worked with him on a number of occasions. I knew him not very well, but we were friendly. And he impressed me in his late 80s, doing these Shakespearean,
Hmm.
iconic, again that word,
Yeah.
iconic Shakespearean roles with his aplomb until something killed him. But he was firing on all cylinders until the end.
He was, wasn't he? I think he's the oldest ever person to win an Oscar as well for an
Yeah, I
acting
think so.
Oscar, and
Yeah,
his yeah. I mean, fantastic
yeah,
range. One of my favorite actors, and his
absolutely.
daughter Amanda Plummer is equally
Yeah,
fantastic from what I've seen of her work.
yes,
So was Christopher very sort of amenable, down to earth, a nice
absolutely. He had a way. He could be a real cocky son of a bitch.
right?
You know, he was doing a TV series. I worked on two occasions. He was doing a thing for TV in Toronto, and he was sort of a private eye kind of a guy, and I was the police guy, the police detective, and he had a deal on that Mr. Plummer leaves the set at 6. That's it.
Hmm.
And so 6 o'clock rolls around, everybody rolls up that's it, we're done. Or they'll try and finish what they can without him. But he could do that kind of thing, and he did, and that was fine. He was protecting his own energy, and so the first time I worked with him, we did a film called The Amateur. We filmed again north of Toronto, and then in Vienna.
Hmm.
And I found him absolutely wonderful. There was a scene where he's interrogating me. I was playing this mountain guide, spy, mercenary kind of a character, and I was his prisoner, and he's interrogating me, and we were having a little trouble with lining up a scene. We were in a small space. Yeah, it was interior, but it was in Austria, which
Hmm.
is everything was in reverse. We were shooting outdoor scenes, which were representing the Alps. We're shooting those north of Toronto, and then the interior scenes, which you could shoot anywhere. We're shooting those in Austria. Don't ask me why. I don't know. But we're in a very confined space. It was a nice little cabin, and we were trying to figure out how to shoot this thing. I said, Chris, why don't we shoot it like this tight? And he brought it to the director, and that's what we did, and it worked. And he was very amenable, and he did not mind the young upstart coming up with an idea. And we've always been friendly since.
Well, yeah, it sounds like he was lovely and a giving, generous person.
Absolutely,
That's
that
wonderful.
was my sense of him. Yes.
Well, I think it's probably a lovely story to end the evening on. Thank you very much for
Oh, my pleasure.
spending time and well, thank you for giving me so much of your time, and I've enjoyed all aspects of our chat. It's been really interesting.
Well, there's nothing I enjoy more than talking about myself. So thank you for the opportunity.
You're quite welcome. Okay, well, thank you very much for everybody that's joined us. Hope you enjoyed it, and thank you very much. It was a great event, I think. So
Good. I hope it worked
wonderful.
well for you.
Thank you very much. Well, have a lovely
Right.
weekend, and great to talk to you.
You too. Yeah.
Thanks. Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye.